Welcome again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're with Denise Bard today. She is a childhood abuse survivor and has turned her trauma into now advocacy for children and for people to survive and thrive. She is a speaker and also is working on a book at the moment. Hopefully that will be out soon enough. I do want to give just a warning to anybody who has children around. This is going to be a podcast where you're going to want them to not be listening for this. This is for adults, just so you know, giving that warning and a heads up. So if you would like to go ahead and put in headphones or move the children to another room or what have you. But we're very grateful to Denise for being willing to come on and talk about her experience and talk about how to help children who are in similar situations. So thank you, Denise.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up? And I know you had childhood trauma, so I guess that's probably going to be part of your story.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Trenton, New Jersey. I guess I'll give you a background on my story. I was born to two drug-addicted teens. My mother was 16 when she had me. And I grew up on my mother's side, and faced many forms of abuse. And, if I can go into not great detail, but I can tell you the background.
Okay.
So I grew up, and I always say grew up because I don't like to say I was raised, because you'll understand in a bit why I mean that. So I grew up in my mother's side of the family, which was already a dysfunctional to the next level family. They've already had their abuse. It was like a cycle. And so I was brought into that. Having a mom who was 16 and drug addicted was not a way that you could be raised, because she was still a child herself, still dealing with things. So I was bounced back and forth within kinship care. That started about when I was 4. But any time that I was with my mother, there was a lot of trauma that happened with her. And, where do I'm trying to make sure that I want to make sure that I make the words not so triggering. So with my mom being a drug addict, and when I was with her, her drug addiction had gotten so bad that she actually would take me to places that I shouldn't have been taken and forced to do things that I shouldn't have been forced to do, just so she can get her high. And so I spent my childhood kind of facing a lot of different things, such as that, and the other forms of abuse. Your mental, your physical, psychological is the worst. And I found myself at 14 just done with life. And so I did not want to continue any longer. And one morning I went into our cabinet. At 12, I had moved in with my mother back again as full time, because she had gotten custody, showed the courts that she was no longer a drug addict. And
how did she do that?
So based upon what I can recall and what I know about things, is that and I'm born in 75. So this whole time frame that I'll talk about primarily is from 75 to, I think it was like 87 that I moved back in with her, 87. So when kinship care, family court takes you from your parent, it's kind of like foster care. They are not providing you safe environments. They have to go through, they have to provide and show the court that they are not a drug addict, that they're in a stable place, that they can, take care of their children. And she tried that several times and failed. And then that last time she had gone through, I don't even know how many programs, and became clean and showed the court that she can, provide, which I really hope that today's day and age that it is different from back then. I think that of course the system is broken, but I think, and I hope that it's not as broken as it was then. So yeah, she provided, she went through the drug rehab and came out clean, stayed clean for so long, got herself a job, did the typical things that you need to do, as far as like I'm told that you have to do in order to show that you are capable to taking care of your child. And I'm sure that that happens for a lot of people, and that does work. And that's like the whole idea, right? This family reunification and everything happens. It's just it didn't happen that way for me. And so my mom went from a cocaine addiction to prescription drug addiction, and that does happen as well. So I had moved with her when I was about 12, and 2 years into it, I had been told every day how I was hated, how she wished I was someone else, how it's my fault she doesn't have a family, or she doesn't have a husband or a boyfriend. Anything that could go wrong and happen was completely my fault. And as a kid, when you are told this over and over, you start to believe it. I mean, it's drilled into you. And I had that happen from the time I was 4. I can tell you, like, every time, she would say, well, this is your fault. This happened to you because it's your fault. This is your fault. I can't get this because this is your fault. And at 14, I was like, I'm just something. I just don't want to be anything. So I'd gone into our closet, the cabinetry, and I grabbed out a handful of her pills, and I crushed them into water, and I started to drink. But after that first sip, I stopped. And I get a lot of people who say, did you change your mind? Were you scared? And truth be told, no, I wasn't scared. I really didn't change my mind. I did, only because I knew just something clicked right then and there. And I knew if I did this, that she would be the victim. She would claim to be the victim. My grandmother, who didn't sexually abuse me, but definitely was very psychological in her abuse, would have claimed the victim. And that it angered me, because I'm like, no, I'm the victim, no, I don't, no, you cannot do that. So I stopped. I went to the bus stop, and I actually told a friend who I knew was going to tell the school. And I don't know if you want to call that a cry for help, but maybe that was, and I'm okay to say that may have been at that point. She told the school, and of course they called the police. They called.
Sorry to interrupt, but what did you tell her? That the abuse had been happening?
No, I think my friends kind of knew. So when you're drilled from a young age that the things that are happening to you is your fault, you don't tell anybody anything, and that's why I never told about the abuse, because I was told this is normal. Other people do this. And here's an interesting thing, and I don't ever think I've actually spoke about this before, but when I was in kindergarten, I was living with my grandmother, but my mother would come and go. I had a neighbor who was being molested by her father. And so I knew a little bit about that. And it just kind of made you think, well, this is all normal. I mean, if her dad does it, and I'm having things happening, it's kind of normal, right? So we don't tell people because, 1, it's normal. Why would you say something? 2, when you're told that it's your fault and you're a kid, you don't want to get in trouble. So if I tell it, I'm going to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. And I think there was a couple of friends who knew things weren't right. As kids, we don't always understand, at least back then too, we didn't understand. And again, times were completely different. There wasn't a lot of good touch, bad touch being taught. And there wasn't a lot of these different things that now we know and we teach. But back then we didn't. So when you're drilled as a kid, yeah, that's what you think. So I did tell my friend, I was like, not about the abuse. I said, I just don't want to be here anymore. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I may have said, I think she was one of my friends who I think knew things weren't right. And she was one of my friends who was the same age, but yet she was this old woman in a small body, so, so yeah, I told her, and, she told the school, hey, my friend, whatever. And so when my mom came in, she claimed the victim, and I got so angry, and I just told them, I'm not going home. I don't care where you take me, but I will not go home. And fortunately for me, in the area that I lived, there was a place called Anchor House, and it's a nonprofit shelter for runaway, abused, and homeless youth. And so that's where I was brought, and it was life-changing. It kind of set me on, it was the foundation for me to begin healing, to begin taking control of who I was. So I like to tell people, and I do, I share this, I'm going to share it in the book. I walked in as something and I came out as someone. And so, yeah, that was one of the pivotal moments where I finally like had this like aha moment. So, but I went in, as soon as I got in, it was, so if you've gone through trauma as bad, you know, as I have, and I will say this too, there's no competition with trauma. It doesn't matter what you've gone through. If it's a trauma to you, it's a trauma. I have no judgment against other people's traumas because we all feel this. So when I went into Anchor House, the first thing I felt was safe. Like, I remember taking that first breath, like, you know, I can, every time I tell the story, I think about it and I just breathe. And it's hard to explain to a lot of people who, if they haven't gone through trauma, it's that breath of feeling safe for the first time when you've spent your life feeling afraid every second of every minute of every day, where there wasn't that ability to just let go, because it was always like, you were always, I mean, like literally, like your muscles were always tight, worried about what was going to happen next. And as soon as I walked through the doors, it was like this release, you know? And the first person I'd met was my caseworker, who, she is still in my life. Since I was 14, my caseworker is still in my life, has gone to my wedding. I mean, I love this woman to death. She was the first person to show me what an unconditional hug was, like a safe hug. I never felt that before. So all these things I was having and experiencing were all new to me. At 14, you're learning about being able to be hugged and what a safe, unconditional, loving hug is. Being able to sleep at night without covering your head with a pillow because you're terrified what you'll see, what will happen, what you'll hear. Waking up and not being afraid of, oh my God, what's going to happen to me today? All these little things started to happen for me. And it was like, I don't want to say I was born into this moment at 14, but emotionally I was, because I finally started to learn the things that, you know, I give my kids. You know, your kids, you teach them certain things, but in these moments I wasn't. So I had spent all this time being someone's something, you know, the something that would pay for a drug addiction, something that would be beat because, you know, of anger, of drug withdrawal. And if you've faced a parent who's gone through drug withdrawal, or maybe a spouse, it is like looking the devil in the eyes. And it's a image that just shears you right through your soul. I mean, like, it just goes right through you. So I had spent all this time facing this devil and these little things that were happening, that now I'm faced with almost this like, oh, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do I do? I've never been in a situation like this. What do I do? But what came out of there is three things for me. And, you know, I'll keep referencing back to this, but my counselor taught me three things. First, what happened to you is not your fault. And I'm still working on that. That is something that I don't think I'll ever stop working on, because when you reflect back to your, you know, the different things, like I get triggered a lot, and I think back at that, I'm constantly thinking, well, what was I doing that happened to me? What did I do wrong? I had to have done something wrong. There has to be a reason that this happened. And so, her telling me that, it was, you know, it was huge, but at the same point, I never told her everything. So keep in mind, I went in there without telling the real abuse because I was afraid. And so they just knew I didn't want to go home and that things weren't okay, because that child, you know, in my elementary school days, you know, we'd have social workers come and go checking because I was in kinship care. So as far as they knew, it was just, I don't know, family dynamic trauma, but not like the real abuse, because I was so afraid to say anything, especially to my counselor, because I loved her to death. She was like this big sister that took care of you. And so I never wanted to lose her. So I was afraid, well, I caused these physical things that happened to me. I can't tell anybody. But she told me, and I still hear it in my head every single day, it's not your fault. And it is something that I know that I have to continue to work on, because I don't think that we'll ever, at least some of us won't ever get to that point where you're right, it wasn't my fault. And I could tell you certain things. I'm like, nope, that wasn't my fault. But there's always something that makes you go, you know? The second thing, she said, things are always going to be harder before they can get better. And I would be so angry about that, because I'm like, how much harder can it be? Like, I can't take anymore. I cannot take anymore. And the truth is, she is so right. It was like, those were so hard that now I can start to get better. Now things will start to make sense. And then the third thing, which is part of why, or part of my resiliency, it is part of the thing that I talk most about to teachers, to people in positions to help kids, to other survivors, because I think we can all reflect back on this. She said, look around, there's somebody, and look around, because there are people around you who care about you and want you to do well. And she would tell me that every time we had counseling, and I would get so angry, because I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I have to focus on the abuse. I need to survive. I don't have time. Like, I need to survive. We're in this survival mode, so we're so tunneled into what's in front of us that we do forget that there's all this other stuff around us. And so it kind of clicked. And at the time, obviously, I was like, you know, what did I call it? I'm like shifting my view. But really, hindsight is, she was saying, shift your focus. Don't focus on that. Shift your focus. Because a lot of time you'll hear people say, oh, well, change your perspective. Well, you can't do that on every separate thing. You can't. I cannot change the perspective, or change my perspective of what happened to me. There's no angle in it. But what happened was I shifted my focus. And once I did that, just everything became clear. You know, everything started to, oh, man, like I started to recognize all these people. And during that time, it just, something triggered, and I don't know, I don't have an explanation for it. It's just, one day, one of the teachers that I had was actually a volunteer there at Anchor House. Now, I don't know how that worked out. It was like divine intervention. I'm not even sure. But she was my 8th grade math teacher, and she was my absolute favorite teacher, and not because of math. Like, I totally sucked at math. So I don't know how I connected with her, but something drew me to her. And she would actually give me rides back and forth to the shelter, because we were all coming from different areas. So there wasn't a bus that could take you to and from school. And I was in 8th grade. I don't remember those car rides, maybe one, but I don't remember them. But what I remember, and this is what I talk about, is a 30-second moment. And this was the first one, and the one that changed everything for me. One day we were in school, and her classroom was across from my locker. And I'm at my locker, and I'm pulling out books, doing something, and she called me over. She's my favorite teacher. I'm going to zip on over there. And I did. I ran over, and someone had come in to see her. And I remember this as if it's happening right now. She pushed my hair off my shoulders, because I had really long curly hair. And she pushed my hair off my shoulders, and then placed her hands there and said, "This is my Denise." And man, in that moment, like, I can tell you right now, every time I say it, it's like right here. In that moment, I had felt for the very first time in my life that I could actually be someone who is wanted. Like, I'd grown up being told nobody would ever want you. I don't want you. That I really believed that I wasn't worthy. Like, I wasn't worth being someone's. But in that 30-second moment, I went from not knowing what that felt, to this like heavy, and I say heaviness, it's not a bad heaviness. It's this like deep, deep feeling. And I know that's not what she meant. It was such an innocent moment and it was such an innocent sentence, but she said something that I never heard before, which caused me to feel something I had never felt before. And so I call those the 30-second moments, which it transcends the time that it actually took for her to say something to me. So it could have been big, huge things going on in my life. Just that slight little moment, that is what started my my road to this kind of recovery or healing, as you call it, that I started to now recognize things. And these 30-second moments started to build upon themselves. So about, I'd say 6 months later, I had been back in my house because reunification is always the goal by the system. I don't understand how they can do it, but they do it. And so reunification happened and I was back living with my mother. And actually, let me take this back. There was so much happening. I had gotten out of Anchor House and they sent me to an uncle. And unfortunately, that home environment was not good at all either. I ran away and begged my mother to let me come back and live with her. And so I did. And people will ask me why. And I said, because I knew how to survive. So we live in this abusive environment. And what's scary about that is that we're scared of it, yet we know how to survive in it. When you put us in another environment that we haven't been trained for, it's kind of like, no. I'll go back to the abuse because I know how to get through that, versus
the double you know versus the double you don't know.
Yes. And it's, there's something funny about that too. And I'll say that after this. When I had begged for her to let me come back, I got to go back into my school where I knew everybody. It was my safety zone. It's just where I was, and I was good, So then about, I guess it was like 6 months later, I had gone into high school at this point and beaten down again. The physical abuse started coming again. I learned some strategies with that. I tell this story because somebody else out there might understand this and know that it is okay. I laughed. Okay. So I'm saying this because I know that there are other survivors who are like, oh my God, I did too. I thought I was weird. No, you're not weird. I learned survival skill of this. When my mother would hit me, I learned if I laughed, and I don't know how it started, but whatever it did, but if I laughed, the harder she hit, the harder I laughed, the quicker it was over. And she'd like, oh, you're crazy, and walk away. So I learned a survival skill, and I still laugh because my cousin and I have been in the same situations, and we laugh about these moments. They're not funny to most people, but to us, it's kind of one of those, it's okay. Like I could tell another survivor, it's okay. We can share a story and laugh about it, where somebody else will be like, that's so horrific. I can't believe it. I'm like, no, but that's our survival. That's what we did to survive. So I had a lot of that, but I also, again, continued with the beat down of the you're not wanted. I hate you. I wish you were someone else. It was constant and everyday type thing. And again, at 16, I was done. I just didn't. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And you know what? I don't care if they claim victim. I just want out. I want out. I want some, I just want to not hurt anymore. And so I decided I was going to go to my last basketball practice. And something you should know is I'm 5 foot tall. There's nothing on me that like screams to you that I would play basketball. And I really didn't. But the coach at the time had been my soccer coach. And I remember walking into that practice. She came right beside me and she like threw her arm and took me into this headlock. And as she did, she's like, you know what? I think I'm going to take you under my wings. And again, like time stopped and that 30-second moment happened. She knew nothing about my background, like nothing. She didn't know where I'd been. Like this was all fresh and new. Like I was just some kid to her, right? And in that moment, like I remember just feeling like I mattered. And earlier in that day, I didn't matter. I didn't matter to anyone, at least in my head, I didn't matter. And in that moment, she's like, no, you matter to me. Well, needless to say, it prevented me from going through with what my actions were going to be.
So you had a second suicide attempt planned.
I had it planned out. I hadn't done it yet because I wanted to go to my practice to kind of say goodbye. And so, yeah, it was going to follow my practice, and it didn't. But because in that moment, she just made me feel like I mattered. Somebody's looking out and seeing me. And so about this time, I'm starting to build on this. And I really didn't understand it quite yet. But as hindsight, I look at these moments and I'm like, wow, I got built up there to this one. And when I was about to fall off, another moment came. So all these moments came to build me up. And my high school teacher about the same time was a gym teacher, my health gym teacher. I don't know how we got close, but I got close to her where she could actually read me, where it's like she knew I needed to talk. Again, still not sharing what's happening to me, but it was, I'm off. And so she would call me over and come into my car and want to talk to me. And I think it's funny because, nowadays you can't do that. Like you can't go in your teacher's car and sit there and talk. But she always brought me, and she was like, the first thing she would do is she'd tap me on my knee and say, come on, how is your day? How are you doing? What's going on? Those little things. And like, it would just like, it's that 30-second moment again where I went from not feeling worthy about anything to, my God, somebody's invested in me. Somebody wants to know me. Do you know what I mean? Again, I wasn't still telling. I think that's something that a lot of people are like, well, you never told. No, I didn't. But yet I still survived. It was because I built all these little like moments. And what came out of that, again, is this constant of, I'm gaining these different feelings. I'm gaining these different feelings. And I realized I didn't realize, my daughter told me this. 2 years ago, my daughter turned 18. And growing up, I never told her about my past. We stopped talking to my mother because I was still terrified all the way into my almost 40s that I was like still scared of her. And my family that I allowed contact, but I was always walking on eggshells. And then my husband's was in the Air Force. We were out of the state I had grown up in. So I kind of had that safety now. And so I blocked everybody. I blocked it and I started fresh. Not that it was easy, had a lot of things were happening, but I wanted my kids to never have to face anything. I never wanted them to walk on eggshells. So I never told my daughter anything. She had forgotten who that person was, but I never told her. And as she got older, she was more inquisitive. And then when she turned 18, I had said, to her, listen, when you turn 18, you could ask me about my childhood. It just wasn't bad. But if you want more information, you have to wait till you're 18. And she did. So as I'm telling her about my, childhood and past, and I only shared with her the things I was comfortable with. I never shared with her how I was, a form of payment, trafficking, if you will. I never shared that with her. But I shared everything else that I was most comfortable with. And at the end, I said, I just wish I had a mom. Because if I had a mom, I feel like I could be a good mom to you, a better mom to you. I would know what to do. And she stopped me, and I'm driving, and she put her hand on my arm, and I almost startled me. But she was like, Mom, I love the way that they raised you because I love the way you raised me. That moment happened, and it was, as we talked, it was those 30-second moments that I learned how to feel wanted. I knew that feeling. I was able to give that to her. She's like, I've never not felt wanted. I never felt like I didn't matter. And I always know that you're going to be there if I want to talk to somebody. If I need someone to talk, you will always ask me, how is my day? All these little things, I went from not having to now I can give to my kid. And it's funny because people will tell you all the time, give your kids what you never had. And I would get angry. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I've never had it. How can I give them something I've never had? Well, here it was. I did. And I never knew that. So I really found out just how powerful little moments in your life can be 2 years ago, and like really how that impacted me. And that's kind of how I was like, you know what, I'm going to share this, because somewhere out there, there's a survivor, there's a kid, there's an adult who sees that there may be a 30-second opportunity to help a kid. There's a survivor who they can reflect back and go, you're right. You know what? I made it to this section. I made it to that section. Or I needed to know that, oh, that feeling, yeah, that's what I want to give to my kids. And then, we just need to know that we're not alone and no matter where you are in your healing, or, if you're an adult. I mean, I'm 48, and it was, in the last 5 years that all this stuff went, wow, like all click. So you're never too old, and yet you're never too young to know that you can still be like who you want to be. So I always say, I'm not the story. I'm not someone else's story. I am actually my story, the story I wrote for myself. So I think somebody said to me once, or I heard this, you look like your mother and father when you're born, but you look like your decisions when you die. And so that's pretty powerful. So now I'm, those were my decisions. So now I know when I die, I am creating my own story. So I'm going from something to someone.
Wow. There is a lot that I can say about that, but I want to move this forward in a way that will benefit the audience.
Yes.
So I want to ask you a question. For someone who is an adult and sees a child that they think, like you, something might be wrong, and I don't know what's wrong. And you said you never told anybody.
Mm-mm.
2 questions. Do you wish that you had actually told somebody? And secondly, assuming that the answer is yes, which I would assume it is, I don't know. If an adult has a child in their life that they suspect might be enduring similar things to what you endured, what can they do to let that child trust them enough so that they do reveal the abuse, so that they can be extracted from that abusive situation?
Yes, I do wish. It's one of my regrets. I wish that I would have told. I think, again, the reason I didn't was because I was drilled. 1, you don't tell. 2, it's your fault anyway. And 3, this is normal. I also think times have changed. So again, back then, there wasn't the good touch, bad touch, this touch. I was also told I would be taken and given to mean people who would hurt me. It's really interesting to try to think of what, they would say. Like because I thought about this. Like I thought, well, what would somebody have said to me? And when I was growing up, there were people like social workers would come in, like they'd saw a bruise or something. What happened to you? Again, you're trained to say, because you think it's your fault. I think that it would be a building of, and again, times have changed. I think we teach kids more these days about good things, bad things. But I think it really comes down to, it is not your fault. I don't want you to be afraid. It's not your fault. And, if I knew that it wasn't my fault, I think I would have been able to say something. So I don't know exactly how to teach a child that, but it's that if I felt it wasn't my fault and I knew I wouldn't get in trouble. Because I think a lot of times that, kids, that's the first thing that I've had other people say is, man, they told me I'd be in trouble if I said something. They told me I'd be in trouble if I said something. I mean, here I was 17 years old talking to my teacher in the car, the perfect opportunity. But we're afraid that if we say something to some people that they're going to leave us, because that's what would happen to me. They get that close to telling somebody, and my grandmother and my mother made sure they were never near me, so I couldn't get to that point. Yeah, that's really, I've been asked that, I've been told that, and I don't know that there's one specific thing. I think it's going to be individualized as to knowing the demeanor of a child and maybe just reiterating that, that if something was wrong, it is not your fault. Anything that's happened, it's not your fault. Do you know what I mean? I think that's it. It's one of those difficult, I don't think that there's one true answer.
If you had ever heard a phrase similar to, say in passing, you had heard someone say to another person, we don't hit children, adults shouldn't hit children, or anything like that, would that have helped your childhood mind break out of that normalization and that it's my fault? Would that, you're talking about 30-second, and would something like that have helped, or was it so deeply entrenched that you would have just thought, why would they say that?
Well, I think for me, it would have been that deep because, again, when you're a kid and you learn from an early age, and we've had that, but again, back then, people did get hit. You would get hit with a belt. You would get hit that was normal, right? That was normal. It's just, where did it cross the line? I think that's the best question, is where does it cross the line of okay discipline to not okay discipline? So nowadays, you want to, I tell my kids, as they grow up, I have a 18-year-old and an almost 20-year-old, they grew up knowing that, they could get a spanking. That was, we spanked on the butt or the hand, but that was when they were like little and trying to learn little things. But they know, they know that's not okay. And you know what I mean? There's a line or whatever. Yeah, I think, again, it comes to the point where, what type of, that's hard because of how times have changed with discipline, right? That is like so hard to tell and stuff. Now, if you say to a kid, we don't hurt people, we don't, you shouldn't be slapped or you shouldn't be hit in the face, you shouldn't be this, you shouldn't be that. Then it was, well, what did you do? What did you do to deserve that? Right? You must have done something to get hit, when you're at this age. How they teach kids this today, it is probably we don't hit people, like, you shouldn't be hurt, things like that.
What about I think a lot of people haven't heard of this, the bad touch, good touch teaching. For parents who haven't heard of it or don't know what it is about, could you educate us on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, if somebody would have said to me, would have said, oh, well, bad touch is when you touch in this area. Has anybody ever touched you in this area? Or I wouldn't say, has anybody ever touched you? I would first start out as, a good touch is you can hug somebody. Mom loves you, I'm going to hug you. A bad touch is that hug maybe goes down to areas that you shouldn't be, in. I think I saw something over the course of the last 20 years where I was watching a documentary, or I guess it's a documentary, where they had dolls, right? We all have dolls. And the therapist had pointed out, this is an area that's a bad touch. This is an area that's a bad touch. And getting to understand that those areas are not good things. What's good things? What's not good things? I think if somebody would ask me, those specific words that, have you been touched down here? Have you been touched here? I absolutely probably would have said something, not thinking in myself that's, that'll get me in trouble, because they're just asking me these simple questions, So, with my kids, it was like, if somebody touches you in this area, if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable or just different things like that, I want you to come to me. Like, I'm hypervigilant too. So like, I was like, anybody who comes near my kids, even if they had the best intentions, I am like, I don't like, no, that's not good. I just, that's how my mind is done. But I wish that the good touch, bad touch was taught back then, because I know for a fact I would have said something.
Yeah. And it would have got you out a lot faster.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I saw a video the other day of, I believe it was an Indian classroom, where the teacher had a student stand up and she was doing a demonstration of good touch, bad touch. So she would do a touch and the child had to say, just stand there and be like, that's fine. And if she demonstrated bad touch, the girl would go, no. And she'd throw her hands out and like push the hands away to demonstrate what you do if someone starts to touch you. And I
Yeah.
think it was physically like between the shoulders and the knees, like someone stroking you and that sort of thing. And then she would just go, no. And it was a demonstration to all the other students I loved that they did that because I don't remember that being in a curriculum before. And I love that it's there now.
Yeah, no, there wasn't anything of that, Again, like I grew up in the late 70s and 80s, and we definitely didn't have things. I mean, they weren't even teaching sex ed at that point in time. So like, I don't think anybody would ever, but yeah, no, I think that was probably one of the, things that hindered a lot of people was not knowing where and what. And yeah, that's pretty powerful to have, like, especially like you just said, from the shoulders down to the knees. That's your area. That's the biggest area. Like, we need to understand what's okay, what's not okay. And so I have a son who's 17. He has autism. And so higher functioning, but, he's not always with me. He has, people at school on different things. And I have always taught him, this is like, if anybody ever does this. Unfortunately, we had, when he was younger, there was one of his classmates who was in a foster home was getting molested. And so I, had, oh, Carson, we don't do this, or we don't do that, or that's not okay. We don't, you use the wording and trying to figure out and make sure that they understand these are areas in which it's not your fault if somebody touches you, but you should tell mom, and you're not in trouble, because that was the thing. You're not in trouble, and I'm not, don't worry, you're not in trouble type of thing. Because I think we're told you'll be in trouble.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I've heard of incidents similar to that happening, especially to children who do have different brain abilities, whether in any direction, which is sad. But I wanted to ask you, though, about after you got away, finally, how did you transition through young adulthood into finally becoming a mother?
Well, I became a mother before I really came away from them. I think it was, first of all, I have an incredible husband, and I always say, like, it was, he was meant to be in my life and be in the Air Force and be able to take me out of an environment which helped me to really kind of make that change, even though I was still afraid, as an adult. I'm 48. I was 30 something before I had a little bit of courage to like cut everybody off. But during like that younger years, you make some mistakes, you do some things, you learn your way through things. But I think for me, again, like, and I don't mean how crazy this is, but again, I think those little moments really helped me continuously as I grew up, even into my adult life, because, they're a part of you that, like my daughter said, they collectively made a mom for me. Like, all these women weren't a mom, but they collectively made me one. So I was constantly on the, I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to if they see me again one day, I don't want them to be disappointed. It sounds like kind of like a weird thing, but it's...
No, it sounds like psychological abuse is what it sounds like.
Yeah. So going into my adulthood, it was a hard balance. It was hard to figure out. I knew who I didn't want to be, though. I think that was a big thing. I knew who I didn't want to be. And as a mom, when I became a mom, it became more clear those moments and those teachings that these women did for me. It was like, right, it was if they were my mom and taught me how this is. So it right away, I just felt that, like, I love my kid. I want this kid. It was, in my mind, that's how I was, and that's how I felt. So it was good that I had felt that before, and I went into it.
Wait, I just want to clarify. When you said the women that collectively made your mom, you didn't want to disappoint. Were you talking about your actual mom and grandmother, or were you talking about the women who had mentored and loved you?
Women who mentored me.
Okay.
So
that makes
I talk about, so for me, these women who gave me these 30-second moments, now it sounds so whatever, but these are these 30-second moments that when you put them together would be a mom, because these are the things that I'm giving to my own children. I had them just different times by different women.
Right.
And
Okay.
so that learning kind of helped me. And again, I just didn't want to be that mom. I wanted to be me. And I wanted my kid to never face the same things. And again, I am very lucky that I have an incredible husband. So, you know, although we have completely two separate upbringings, and really he didn't know a lot about mine, in which a lot of people are like, really? And I'm like, yes. I said, because I wanted him to know me and not know that. And so that helped. That has helped me. But as far as being a mom, it's still difficult. I will tell you that. I mean, my kids are older. I'm older, but not having a mom has always been a struggle for me. I don't think that is ever going to go away, because my kids are at different stages in their life, and I don't know how to parent that way. I know nobody comes with a book, but a lot of times, if you are lucky enough, you have a mom to call and say, oh my God, my kid's going through this. What did you do when I went through it? Or something like that. I don't have that. So it's been a lot of trial and error. But I also know to ask for help now as an adult. So I will reach out to, I'll talk to friends, or to be honest, I have a couple of these teachers now in my life still. So I've been able to, like, man, I'm at this stage with my kid, and they've just given me a little bit, and that's been nice. That's been nice, but it still isn't the same as going back, with a child. So I think for us as survivors, being a parent, it's always going to be a work in progress.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But with that, I'm really impressed about your husband, and that you were able to find him. And it made me think of something. I know a lot of women, when they grow up in an abusive situation, end up marrying someone who abuses them as well. How is it that you managed to find such a wonderful husband who treats you so well?
It's a good question. And again, I know this, I keep going back and back and back about these moments. I think because I looked at all these different women and removed myself from what was happening to me at home, and like kind of collectively like seeing these different things in life, I knew what I wanted and not what I didn't want. And that's not to say I didn't make mistakes. I've met a few share of people, but again, I was fortunate and I didn't get into an abusive relationship, and wasn't the greatest ones, but I have made my share. But I don't have a really good answer on that, except to say that I reflected back on the women I saw in my life. Of course, I didn't see their marriages, except for my high school teacher, the one who would talk to me. Her husband was my other teacher. And they were so opposite, but so great together. So I didn't have a lot of role models. Everybody in my life was divorced 3-4 times, never got married. Statistically, I shouldn't have what I have. Like, statistically, I shouldn't have this wonderful marriage. We've been married for 22 years. I think, again, it just goes back to trying to think of every woman that I had met, and learning that that's the kind of woman I wanted to be. And I think that kind of helped me in knowing what I didn't want. But I'm just very, I hate to say fortunate, lucky. It just happened. Like, it just happened where I got this incredible person.
It sounds to me like you created an amalgamation of these exemplars in your life.
Yeah.
And molded that into the person you wanted to be. And I'm wondering, especially with the, as we do focus on a stage of becoming a person you want to be so that you're ready for marriage. And I'm wondering, when that happened and you were creating this, like you said, you are making your own story. When you were doing that, you said, again, your husband didn't know your past before. And it made me think that you molded yourself into the kind of person who would attract the kind of person that he is. And then by doing so, you paved the way to find happiness instead. And you also paused, didn't you? Like you said, you actually thought about it instead of just rolling through the process, through the never-ending abusive cycle and carrying that on. You actually stopped and separated yourself from it and said, I'm not going to do that. This is how I want to be. Is that fair?
No, yeah, absolutely. To a T. Yeah, it was, I couldn't probably explain it any better than you just did, but it's true. For me with my husband, it was, he has met my family, obviously, but I had tried to keep, my life separate, so that I was over here living the adult life that I wanted and would only allow trickles of this other time. And I think a lot of people say, well, how didn't you tell him everything? Why didn't you tell him everything? I said, because in my mind, if I did, he would run. Not to say that he would have, but we're so afraid to share our past, especially if you've had these abusive environments and stuff, because people look at you and feel sympathy instead of having an intimate relationship, instead of having this adult relationship. They're looking at you as, I'm just going to say it, a damaged thing that they don't know how to fix, because people want to fix you too. And I didn't want them to fix me. I'm fixing myself. Like, nobody else can do it for me. I got to do it myself. So, I didn't tell him. I mean, obviously he knows now, especially like the last 10 years. And there's a lot that he doesn't want to know. And not because he doesn't want to know it, it's that he can't imagine me being treated the way that I was. So I'm okay with that, but yeah, you just don't, I wanted myself to be the person that I wanted to be, that I am, that I had become with my husband, and not what I was growing up.
So at what point did you leave home, and did you go to university, and how did you meet him? Like, what was the transitional phase?
So, I didn't get to go to college because I didn't have the finances. I didn't have a lot of support to teach me about scholarships, teach me about different ways to get, financial aid. I didn't have any of that. So I tried. I went to community college, but I was, when I lived with my mother, I had to start giving her money to help her. And so, I would work, and it was difficult for me to work, do that, and go to school and try to become something from school. 19, I had moved out. I was back and forth again, because during this whole time I was back and forth between, like, I'll live with my grandmother, my uncle, my mother, and it was just a constant whatever. But it was about 19 when I moved out, and I kind of, shifted between places. From about 19, and I think I met my husband about when I was 24, 25. And at that point, I had gotten an apartment by myself. I had been working a state job, so I had an income coming in. And so I was independent on my own. And I think that is a big thing. So because I was independent, I didn't rely on someone else. And I think if we can do things by ourselves, then we don't get back into that cycle of needing someone else to take care of us, or trying to find someone to take care of us, because we don't need that. And I think that's a huge thing. I think for me, that was definitely what helped me to be the adult in situations, because I was able to be by myself. I was able to pay for my own stuff. I wish, though, that I had gone to college, but it just didn't, work out for me. So it was, making your dumb mistakes as you're a young adult until you find that place where you can be, you get into this independent thing. So, but I think that's really important. I think if you have the opportunity, you should strive to be able to do it all by yourself, to know that you have the capability of being that person.
Okay. I would love to talk about that more, but since I have about 30 other questions that are in my brain for you, because we do talk about the different stages of life that women go through. So you've met your husband, and then you become married, and obviously you have children, so you were physically intimate at some point. And I do want to talk about several things. First off, when you found out you were pregnant, how was that psychologically, knowing that you were going to be the one raising a child? And how did you prevent yourself from repeating the learned behaviors that you had seen? But before that, I want to ask, for women who have gone through abuse and now they're faced with physical intimacy, which can feel like a barrier. How was it? Did you go through therapy for that? How did you get yourself to be able to be comfortable with that, knowing your past and your history?
Yeah, I've never had that question before. I did not go through therapy with that. I never talked about it. Even as an adult, I really didn't go into details of things. I think that there are points in intimacy, that you're kind of like, whoa, right? But I think because and I guess maybe it's a coping skill, I don't know, or whatever skill it is I separated myself from the past. And so, yes, there are things where it was maybe a little uncomfortable. And I think for me, I had to keep reminding myself, this is not who my past is. And keeping him separate from my family made a big difference for me as far as the intimacy went, because I didn't have that, it was just a separate life.
No cross-contamination from...
Yes, yeah, exactly. I had problems over, my young course of life when, I was intimate, and there were times where it was very difficult. But these were people that also, knew my family, not for anything. They knew my family through me, but there was still that connection, that this was different. It was just a different thing. And as far as becoming a mom, I mean, I was super excited and scared all at the same time. Excited to be a mom, scared to be a mom, but I was also sad. Like, I had this heavy sadness because I didn't have a mom. And so I'm going to be a mom, and I'm excited about that. But this heaviness that I don't have somebody to share it with. My mother was still in my life, but I had always, I didn't want her to come to soccer games. I didn't want her to come to anything. I made excuses for her not to come visit us on, wherever we lived. I didn't, because for me, that was facing a sexual abuser every day of my life. If I looked at her anytime, I'm looking at my sexual abuser. So being a mom and coming out, having to be a mom really kind of hit me. It was hard. And how I prevented myself from being that cycle again. I think too, again, I had a great spouse and partner. His life growing up was completely different. And his parents have been deceased prior to meeting me. So I think that also may have played a role, because it was only the two of us. We relied on each other, and he didn't know how to hold a baby. So it was kind of like we were going into this all new together. But again, I reflect back to the women who gave me those feelings, and I knew that that's what I wanted to give to my children. I just didn't know if I could do it. So there's a lot of emotion when you become a parent after facing so much trauma. But I think we know in our mind what we don't want to happen. And we know in our mind, what we do, we just don't know if we can do it. But there's that sadness of not having someone for yourself to go to, and that, all of it is on you now.
So when the rubber hits the road and you're in the middle of a tantrum or someone's having a meltdown, and you've seen your mom react to things that are far less severe, and obviously that will trigger memories, how did you keep yourself from falling into the same types of patterns?
Knowing I didn't want to be her. I just didn't want to be her. So what do I need to do? Maybe it was a different form of disciplining my child. Also, you have friends that they have children about the same age. What are they doing? I'm always listening. I was always getting from my friends too, who were having kids, or groups that I might have been in, and they're like, oh yeah, we had this and that. This is what I did. And I would just take that. I would try all these other methods. My daughter was ornery, so I don't even know if any of those methods really worked. But it all worked out. But I knew who I didn't want to be. I just had to navigate it with knowing that I just need to keep my ears open and let all the positive people in my life be able to learn from them, friends, just different things.
So you had a built-in break between stimulus of the child doing something and you reacting. You had a built-in automatic break, hard break. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be my mom.
Oh, absolutely. And especially as they grew into teenagers, like I found myself yelling at my daughter. And then it was a point in time where I was like, I don't want to yell anymore. I just don't want to yell anymore. I don't want to, you're going to be, and I said, you're going to be ornery. You're going to test my limits, but I don't want to yell anymore. So I'm going to walk away until I could get my head on so that I come back and talk to you. And that was the hardest thing to ever happen because, I can argue with anybody, but that was really, really hard to do. But I'm glad I did it, and that's how it worked. But yeah, you had to have a break. Sure, there were times where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to like scream out the, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was kind of one of those where I just reminded myself, like I was afraid of my mother still, and I didn't want to be that to her. So it was knowing that I don't want to be her. I don't want to look like her. I don't want to be her. What do I need to do not to be her? That's all I knew. And that's what I was going. That's how I did everything. I don't want to be her. So I want to do something different.
When you were talking about watching all those women around you, helping you or seeing, it came to mind the picture of a gleaner, someone who just goes around and gathers everything that they can that is helpful for their family. And it seems like you got really good at picking up whatever you could because you had to piece together almost like constructing your own human, picking up and putting pieces of Denise.
Oh, absolutely. I was a sponge. Just give me, I just wanted to take it all in. I didn't know what was going to really work or what wasn't, but, it was, oh, okay, this person did this. They seem like a good human being and they're, in this really good space. I want to remember that. So let me practice that. Yeah, absolutely. And it could be, it just could have been anybody, but you just have to find positives and try it. You don't know what's going to work for you. It's like they say, there's no book on parenting, right? So you just got to wing it. But you still would like guidance. So I didn't have that in a mother form. So I had to look around and what I felt was a good, I'm going to try that. Seems good. It seems like a good person's thing. Let me try this and stuff. So yeah, absorb what you can.
That's really good advice, especially for people who have been raised in a situation with women that they don't want to emulate, or maybe even fathers they don't want to emulate, but whatever behavior it is. And just to make sure you find good examples. Before we wrap up, though, I wanted to ask you, are there any takeaways or advice? You've given so many in this interview. Are there any key takeaways that you would like to emphasize?
Well, there's a few. Obviously, I gave it, your thing. One is if you are someone in a kid's life, just know that you are probably affecting them more than you think. You are probably making some type of an impact by just a little thing that you say. And I wish for teachers, anybody's listening, it doesn't have to be big. Just give them look at them in the eyes and see them as a person, because maybe they can't get it out of this situation, but they're going to get something from you. And if you're an adult survivor, really, you can change. We're always going to be on healing process. So I just want to make sure the takeaway is this: we always will be healing, and you are not alone. There are so many things that people are facing, and it's okay if you haven't heard your voice or found your voice yet. That's okay. We all find things in our own timing. And that look back at just the positives. It's so easy to only see negative things from the past, and that's normal. There's nothing wrong with you for doing that, because I do it too. But I also want to take control of my past. So by saying that, as I control what I want to remember. And so if you can start to shift that and remember the positive things, the people who were positive to you and how you felt in that moment, and you build upon that, and that really kind of gives you courage and strength and helps you to separate yourself from what your story was supposed to be to what your story is now.
I'm really honored that you come on today. I've never had a chance to sit down with a person who has survived what you have survived, who has come to the point. I have seen a lot of women who are broken, and I've seen a lot of people that are still stuck in their trauma. But to see you glowing and speaking up and representing, I'm just grateful you came on. And thank you so much. I just appreciate your time. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I'll say goodbye to everybody else now, and then I'll talk to you for a little bit after. But thank you, everyone who listened today. I hope this helped. I hope you help children around you. If you suspect that someone around you is enduring this sort of life, please do what Denise said and reach out to them and see if you can help. All right. I'll see you guys then. Bye.